Hi, everyone. David Aragona here with Craig Milkowski, and we're taking a look at the feature race at Belmont Park on Saturday. It is race 6, the Grade 2 Sands Point, going 1.125 miles on the inner turf course for the 3-year-old fillies. Craig, we already talked about a different video, the QE2 Challenge Cup at Keeneland, and that's where the really elite 3-year-old turf fillies are running. But we've got some of the second stringers running in this Sands Point, but it's still a pretty nice field. We've got 8 runners signed on as we throw up the field for this race, and Chad Brown, he's got a pretty strong hand at the QE2, also has the favorite in this Sands Point.
Yeah, no real surprise here. He's always loaded, particularly with the fillies, and he's got another good 3-year-old filly in Higher Truth. We kind of mentioned it on the other one where this is almost getting to where it's a last hurrah for 3-year-olds without having to face their olders. But I think we drew some solid horses here. The speed figures this year for this 3-year-old filly group have been better than they usually are. So I would say it's an above average crop as far as these 3-year-old fillies on the turf.
And in these races, we typically have some murky pace scenarios because a lot of these horses, it seems like the connections don't always want to use their early speed. So we look at the Timeform US Pace Projector. It's another one of those situations where I wouldn't say that we have a confirmed front runner in this race, but I do tend to agree with these positionings that the number 2, Jordan's Leo, and maybe even in the number 8, Our Flash Drive, do seem like the two most likely to go forward in a race that I don't see having a lot of early speed.
No, I was actually surprised that this race doesn't say favors horses on or near the lead. I haven't given it that close a look to figure out exactly why, but it's just an algorithm. But I tend to agree. I think this pace is going to be more closer to the slow side than the fast side for sure. And I do think it's a bit murky as to who's going to take the lead.
And as you were alluding to, we do have a pretty nice group of 3-year-old fillies on the turf, and the number 5, Higher Truth, who is the 2-to-1 morning line favorite, she is among them. And as we take a look at her Timeform US PPs, I mean, you can see it right in her speed figures. She's got a string of numbers that make her good enough to win a whole slew of graded stakes races in this division. Just unfortunately, she's been competing in some really tough races, beaten by horses like Santa Barbara and Shantasara. We'll see the latter of those in the QE2 at Keeneland on Saturday. But Higher Truth, she's running all 3 legs of that turf triple series in New York, beaten narrowly in all 3, but to my eye, Craig, she's gotten great trips in all of those races. So I feel like at some point, Higher Truth is due to have some bad luck.
Yeah, it would seem that way. It's hard to believe she's not a stakes winner yet, but as you said, she's had every opportunity. My biggest concern with her, and don't get me wrong, I think she's clearly the horse to beat in this field, but it's the distance of the race. She's a horse who hasn't shown a ton of speed and didn't really get to start to do her best running until she stretched out to 1.25 miles and even beyond. So I'm a little worried about the cutback. Maybe it's just, that last chance with 3-year-olds trying to get her a graded stakes win. But while she is the horse to beat, she's one I'm not going to be afraid to take a shot against.
No, I think that's a good point about the distance of the race, cutting back to 1.125 miles, because she is a daughter of Galileo and seemed like she really improved going longer, as she did last time in that Jockey Club Oaks, going 1 3/8 miles. Let's take a look at the stretch run of that race. Also in here is Harajuku, who we'll talk about in just a second. I thought Higher Truth got the best trip of all, though, Craig, because she was down on the inside, setting a pretty slow pace, and at Belmont on September 18th, you really wanted to be on the rail because they had taken the temporary rails down. The hedge was the place to be. Horses that were riding the rail seemed to always have an advantage that day. And Higher Truth, I just thought, got a perfect trip and was simply second best to her stablemate, Shantasara.
Yeah, there was no real excuse in here. She didn't set an overly taxing pace. She was clear. And as you say, it was the best part of the track. One thing I like about our PPs is you can generally pull up and see where the rail was. You simply click on that where it says Inner Turf Stakes Race, and up pops the whole race conditions. And at the bottom, it'll tell you. So if you don't remember it and you don't want to take the time to watch the replay, you could easily pull it up and see that there was no temp rail for that race.
And the other horse coming out of that race, the number 3, Harajuku, she was also on the rail for the majority of her trip, but she was against the pace of that race because they didn't go that quickly up front. And you can see in the Timeform US pace figure line as we show her PPs that they actually really slowed down in the middle portion of the race. And I think that hurt her a little bit because she broke slowly, actually broke outward coming out of the gate, which put her at the back of the pack and really gave Ryan Moore no choice but to try to save ground and hope for the best, hope that the field comes back to him. Well, they never did, but I still thought thought that she finished up pretty gamely as the only horse to really make up any significant ground in that race.
Yeah, I thought she ran well, and I actually prefer her a little bit to the morning line favorite. And just for all the reasons that you said, she kind of got backed up into where she was stuck, didn't have anywhere to go. Not that she had to check or steady or anything, but her run was just dependent on when the others go, and they just had too much left. But she was still making up a little bit of ground past a few horses, so I think she's got a shot in here for sure.
Yeah, and as you can see, she was running some nice time form ratings in Europe and France even prior to coming to the US when she was in Andre Faub's barn. So she's got some really strong class lines already. She's got a resume that confirms her talent, and she's making her first start now off a trainer switch to Graham Motion. I would imagine that the connections will keep her in this country now, as they do have some runners with Graham Motion, and he does a great job with the horses that he gets from Europe. Typically, he's got great stats with that move. So I think Harajuku makes a whole lot of sense in this Sands Point. But there are some other horses to consider. Another one from the Chad Brown barn is the number 7 Fluffy Socks. Let's take a look at her last race in the Del Mar Oaks. She finishes third this day to Going Global, who's been the dominant force out west. But Craig, we've talked about it quite a bit. These races on the West Coast typically not as strong as their East Coast counterparts, though Fluffy Socks, she does feel like she's a horse on the upswing.
She is. I was a little disappointed in her last race for the reason you mentioned. I thought she was meeting a much weaker field than what she had been seeing back east, losing the technical analysis in that Lake George, and she just wasn't able to get it done. Maybe that course is a little bit tighter, a little tougher for a horse with her running style to really make up ground late, but I was disappointed. The speed figure it's okay, but she's just not for me. I thought if she was going to get it done, last time was the time for her.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I considered her, ultimately ended up going away from her. She just feels like one of these deep closers that's a little bit one pace, and I'm not sure that's going to be the right kind of running style for this particular race. We do have plenty of other horses to consider. It's one of those races where maybe the number 1/3 draft is a little bit tough to make, but I think you can make a decent case for the 7 of the 8 other runners in this race. And a horse that I know that you're interested in, Craig, is the number 2 Jordan's Leo. Let's take a look at her last race when she was second in the Pebbles. And there are actually 4 runners coming out of this race that are all back in here, including Runaway Rumor, Plum Ali, and our Flash Drive. But Jordan's Leo, she finished up the best of those 4.
Yeah, I thought she ran a really nice race that day, and she's just looked like a new horse since she moved to turf. She had decent dirt form, so I could see why it took them a little while to get her there, but she's just shown a new lease on life on the grass. She won that allowance race at Saratoga and backed up that form even at pretty big odds last time out. And I like that she's able to lay up close to the pace. She's one that I think could be eligible to steal this race on the front end. I like that Luis Saez gets them out. We know he can be aggressive at times and when there's not a lot of speed in the field. So she's one, even though she has a little bit of a speed figure deficiency to the favorite that we talked about early. She's been improving, and I think she's one that can make a big dent in this field, particularly if they let her get away early.
Yeah, I think she's dangerous here as well. She proved that she could handle the 1.125 distance 2 back at Saratoga when I thought she arguably ran one of her best races on the turf of the 2. I mean, she was stalking a fast pace that day. The race kind of fell apart behind her, and she still held on for the victory. I think that confirmed that she does have the stamina to be effective in a race like this. Like you said, it's just a step up in class because there's no doubt this is a tougher race than the Pebbles. So she's going to have to do a little bit better, but she does have a favorable pace setup in potentially in doing so. I also want to talk about the number 8, our Flash Drive, coming out of the Pebbles. She did not get a trip that I think her connections were expecting that day because she had a little bit of trouble coming out of the starting gate, broke a half step slowly, and that put her all the way at the back of the pack when that's not really her running style. She had shown a lot more tactical speed in her 2 prior starts, and breaking from the outside, I'm not going to be surprised if Dylan Davis is way more aggressive with her this time. And Craig, if they use those tactics, bringing her forward, I think that could make her another dangerous horse from the front end.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And given her post position, as you said at the outset of this preview, I think it could easily line up just like the pace projector shows. I think you can put a line through that last race, and the pace projector does exactly that. Even though it looks at the last 5 races, we don't use all of them. And I'm pretty confident in saying that's one that got thrown out. And for me as a handicapper, it's one I would put a line through. And of the horses who are eligible to be a big price in here, I think she's one that's really dangerous.
Yeah, one other horse I do want to discuss before we throw up our top picks is the number 6, Plum Ali. Craig, what do you make of this horse? Because she looked so good in the early part of the summer. She ran a huge speed figure in the Wonder again when she was arguably best coming after Cone Lima. I thought it was maybe the stretch out in distance that didn't allow her to be effective in races like the Belmont Oaks, the Saratoga Oaks, but I thought she was pretty disappointing last time in the Pebbles, and I was briefly considering giving her another chance, but given the lack of pace in this race too, I just wonder if she's going to get the right trip.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's a couple things I think. One, I'm not interested in her here because I think last time was probably the last chance I was going to give her. I had similar concerns as you about the distance, and I wonder if maybe it didn't dull her a little bit for that turn back last time to the 1 turn mile race, because she just didn't seem to have any kick at all. The other thing that crossed my mind is these are 3-year-old fillies, and maybe she just developed earlier than some, and now everybody's caught up and passed her because she just doesn't seem to be the same filly she was as a 2-year-old and earlier this year.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point because we do have some horses in this race that are definitely moving forward at this time of year. And one of those might be the horse that you put on top, Craig, as we throw up our picks for this race, the number 2, Jordan's Leo. I imagine you're looking for Louis Size to just put her on the front end and hope for the best.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I won't be surprised if she gets a little bit of pressure from our flash drive from the outside, but pressure in New York is all relative. I mean, she could be sitting off her flank and they could go a 50. Nothing would really surprise me, but I don't really want to see that. I want to see her out there going at a pretty good clip on the lead and just hope she's good enough to hang on, because she's looked like a really good turf filly to me those last couple outs.
Yeah, I went with the number 3, Harajuku. She is going to need a little bit of racing luck because she does not have the tactical speed that Jordan's Leo has or some others in here. But I do think that she arguably ran the best race last time in the in the Jockey Club Oaks when she was coming from off the pace. So I'm looking for her to take a step forward here. First time out for the Graham Motion Barn is the likely second choice. Let's look at the Sands Point on Saturday at Belmont. Good luck if you're playing this weekend.